It is 10 years since Kosovo declared independence from Serbia. Is it an anniversary in any way worth celebrating? You're watching Roundtable with me, David Foster. Kosovo's possible entry into the EU, and it is only possible at some time, perhaps in the future, who knows when, comes with conditions. Its independence must be accepted by Serbia and the two must resolve their differences. Is that at all possible, or will what's been described as a frozen conflict continue?
"10 years after independence, Kosovo is at a crucial juncture. Ever since it declared itself free from Serbian rule in 2008, the small landlocked nation has made European integration a priority. But Kosovo's fragile peace, overseen by NATO troops stationed in the region, is dogged by its violent past. Can Kosovo overcome its obstacles and move forward into a new era of stability? The majority of Kosovars are eager for the country to be integrated into the European Union, with 93% of the 1.8 million population showing support for the move. EU membership would mean economic and institutional progress for the country, and recognition that it is a political player on the world stage. But ethnic and religious differences plague the peace and disrupt its progress. Animosity remains between its majority Albanian Muslim population and its ethnic Serb and Orthodox Christian minorities. Wider regional tensions also threaten stability. Serbia still refuses to acknowledge Kosovo's sovereignty, along with a handful of EU countries that include Spain, Greece and Romania. And its UN membership is blocked by Serbia's allies, Russia and China. Closer to home, Kosovo faces the dual challenge of high unemployment and a sluggish economy. Corruption, organised crime and regional tensions have deterred foreign investors. Unemployment stands at around 30%, and the figure for youth unemployment is even higher, around 50%. The EU Commission says Serbia and Montenegro could be joining the bloc as soon as 2025. But the Union is split over the decision. It says Serbia must first normalise relations with Kosovo. EU-backed peace talks between Belgrade and Pristina suffered a setback in January, after Kosovo's Serb politician Oliver Ivanovic was murdered outside his party headquarters in Mitrovica, plunging the country into a new phase of turmoil. There are also concerns about Kosovo's ruling elite. Prime Minister Ramush Haradinaj and President Hashim Thaçi are both former Kosovo Liberation Army leaders, who have been accused of war crimes and criminal activity respectively. A small but significant country nestled in a powder keg region, and something of a political pawn in larger power plays. As Kosovo tries to look ahead and cement its status as a candidate for EU membership, can it overcome its past for the sake of its future?
Very pleased to say that joining us via Skype from Pristina is Mimosa Armitage, who is Kosovo's former Minister of EU Integration. Here with me at the round table, we have Dennis McShane, author of Why Kosovo Still Matters, and James Kerr-Lindsay, Professor of Politics and Policy at St Mary's University, Twickenham. He wrote Kosovo, The Path to Contested Statehood in the Balkans. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. Mimosa, if I come to you first of all, and then we'll come back to Dennis's book, Why Kosovo Still Matters. Why to you, obviously as a Kosovar it matters, but why to you does it matter in the broader sense?
Well, I have to admit in the very beginning that Kosovo has done tremendous progress in its path since we declared the independence. There was a huge progress in regard to increasing the number of countries who have recognized Kosovo so far. We reached the number of 117. there was the first contractual agreement that has been signed between Kosovo and the EU, and that paved the way of Kosovo toward the EU integration. Kosovo got membership in different international organizations such as World Bank, IMF, Olympic International Committee, International Francophonie, and
Mimosa, you can talk up the achievements as much as you like, but why does Kosovo matter?
It matters because the Kosovo is the last country which became independent after the dissolution of former Yugoslavia. And the fact that Kosovo got independence brings the security and safety to the region. And of course, as other countries got independent, Kosovo deserves also to become and to remain independent.
Dennis, let me ask you, I mean, some years since you wrote Why Kosovo Still Matters, but apart from the achievements or not that have been listed by Mimosa there, well, why in the broader sense does this country really have a standing?
It's Europe's backyard. It's our unresolved problem. It's 10 years since the Declaration of Independence, but actually the bigger anniversary was 20 years ago when the war started. Almost exactly 20 years ago, there was an all-out assault by Serb militia, gunships, helicopters, a lot, on a village where a Kosovan liberation independence person was. And they slaughtered the children. They slaughtered him, obviously, his wife, grandparents. You can go there. It's a shrine now. It's like visiting a battle shrine anywhere in the world. And here we are 20 years on, and it's still frozen, and it's freezing the entire region. This is Europe's backyard. We can't, whether we're in Britain, Germany, France, closer neighbours like Italy, Austria, Greece, have a whole area of Europe, not just Kosovo, it's all its neighbouring countries, aren't moving forward until we solve the Kosovo conundrum. We won't have peace and stability in the region.
The Balkans conflict cost so many lives. Other than the problems that you've outlined from 20 years ago, do the same tensions still exist? Or are we looking at an entirely different time and an entirely different sense of what is happening there?
My impression from travelling there, no, it's got a young population, it's very lively. It is great fun to visit Kosovo, as are other countries in Macedonia, Albania, Serbia too. There's no real conflict there. I don't think violence will return, but nor is there any stability. Nobody will invest properly in Serbia because Serbia won't recognise Kosovo, because Serbia's told not to recognise Kosovo by the Kremlin. The Kremlin likes to play games in the region. Similarly, there are problems between Macedonia and Greece, which is another subject to be discussed. So here we have a kind of through road of Europe through which come drugs, criminality, people smuggling, refugees, immigrants. The people themselves in the region are actually pretty peaceful, but they can't break out of this. They can't get the foreign investment. They can't travel normally until some of these questions are answered. So it's not just Kosovo. Kosovo is perhaps the most interesting, as it were, piece in the jigsaw puzzle. But we solve Kosovo, and then I think finally we can say that's that bit of European history out of the way. They just become normal, small, poor countries, like, say, the Baltic states, and they get on with their own lives.
Mimosa, I'll come back to you in just a moment to answer some of the points that have been put up there by Dennis. But James, Dennis says solve Kosovo and you've solved a lot of other problems. Is it soluble?
Well, I mean,
solvable. Solubile, I think, is what happens in water.
You know, it's a very, very interesting point because it rather depends on where you look at the problem. So viewed from a Balkan perspective, I absolutely agree. We have to solve Kosovo. We have to reach some sort of settlement that will put this issue to bed.
Otherwise?
Well, you know, it's very easy to make predictions of renewed conflict. I don't think that's going to happen, but it does hold Serbia back, it holds Kosovo back. And I think once you hold Serbia and Kosovo back, especially Serbia back, you're creating other problems in the region. You know, we need to have Serbia on a path to European Union membership. You know, once we bring Serbia closer and closer to Europe, then I think that we unlock a whole range of other problems in the Western Balkans. So I think that's incredibly important.
Mimosa mentioned the EU statement last week about European integration, and she said it was an achievement. But in fact, Kosovo was relegated to the very bottom, almost as a footnote, and further down than it had been previously. So do you recognise what she was describing or not?
Well, I think that was really the other point that I'd make is that from a regional perspective, we can see very good arguments for solving this issue. The problem is, at an international level, it becomes a lot more complicated. The reason we're in this situation today is because there has been so much concern by so many countries about the notion of unilateral secession. And this is
which is
really
perhaps why
something,
Spain won't recognise it, why Greece with regard to Cyprus,
exactly,
etc.
why Russia, you know, although Russia has played its own games elsewhere, we've seen in the Caucasus, but countries like China, countries like Indonesia, South Africa, Nigeria, India, Brazil, Argentina, there are a lot of countries, and Serbia often likes to make, you know, the point that if you go by population, 3/4 of the world don't recognise Kosovo, although over 110 members of the UN.
But some have dropped out as well, haven't they? Some would previously recognise it now say they don't.
One so far, Suriname in South America, but you know, I'm not sure we're going to start seeing countries rescinding their recognition. But there are some very, very significant holdouts which will prevent Kosovo from joining the United Nations, and we have to sort of find a way of squaring this circle of the Balkan problem, but also how do we get the message across that, you know, at an international level, that we're not sort of creating violations to prohibitions on secession.
Corruption, youth unemployment, it's not going to end until the other side of it has ended, which is perhaps, you know, more European integration. So it's a vicious circle, isn't it? It's
a bit of a vicious circle. I mean, youth unemployment is very, very high in Spain, southern Italy, chunks of France, not that great in bits of poorer England. What I said was not that the young people there have necessarily a great future, but they're just so much friendlier. I mean, it really is like going back to an old Europe where you're well received, it's traditions of hospitality, great beer, great food, wonderful mountains to walk and ski in, as there are all over the entire region. But you're right, Serbia is cutting off its nose to spite its face. Belgrade should be the regional capital of the West Balkans. It's a brilliant city, great people. We can all lament the disappearance of the former Yugoslavia. Wish we could take that scrambled egg out and find all the original eggs. It's not going to happen. And really the international community has to keep gently leaning on Serbia, because Serbia won't join the EU until it recognises Kosovo. So it's got to cut the Gordian knot. There was a fellow called Alexander the Great who did that. He remember, there's a big knotty problem. He got out his sword and went like that. Now, you can't refer to Alexander the Great in that region because our Greek friends get very, very sensitive indeed.
And you mentioned Macedonia earlier on as well.
Macedonia. But you need that kind of leadership that really is like a General de Gaulle saying, look, hanging on to Algeria, it's over. A Tony Blair saying, look, a united Ireland without the agreement of the Protestant majority population in the 6 counties isn't going to happen. Get real. You need somebody in Belgrade of that stature who turns around and says, let's stop this.
Other than history and pride and the beautiful mountains and the skiing and the beer and everything like that, why does Serbia need Kosovo?
It doesn't. Because it feels it was carved out. It feels that certainly the historic religious centres of the Serb Orthodox Church are in Peć in Serbian, Peć in Albania. They're beautiful monasteries. All the Serbian monks there live in complete peace and harmony. There isn't that tension. Per capita, for example, we have sent more British Muslims from the British Muslim community to fight for IS and do horrible things in the Middle East than have the Albanian Kosovans, who are majority Muslim.
But are there analogies that can be made to other areas that perhaps wanted to cling on to, countries wanted to cling on to, hold on to, and fight over, albeit politically at the moment, when in fact it was nothing other than pride and history that said that they should do so?
I think we see this time and time again. I mean, you know, we have to remember, you know, there's 193 members of the UN at the moment. The vast, vast majority of those cannot be regarded as mono-ethnic or mono-religious states. You know, it's actually the norm that countries are mixtures. And we see that very, very few countries are willing to allow democratic, peaceful processes leading to secession. I mean, Canada is an obvious example, and Britain allowing the referendum in Scotland, for example, was another good case of this. And so Serbia's resisting in this way is actually what we would see from most countries. And many Serbs feel very deeply aggrieved. They say, why are we the exception? Why is it that, you know, for example, and especially what we saw last year with Catalonia, Catalonia declared independence, everyone immediately came out and said this is null and void, this can't be accepted. And the Serbs say, why are we different? Now, you can point to a very clear history. I mean, there isn't the sort of violence that we saw took place in Kosovo. But Serbs would then say, but what about Kurdistan? You know, there was a very strong history of brutality under Saddam Hussein's regime, and yet the Kurds have been told you must put up with autonomy within Iraq, you have no right to secession. And again, when we saw moves last year towards that, it was very, very heavily resisted on the world stage.
Hasn't, James, really the ship sailed on that? I was looking at debates in the House of Commons in 1920 over the Irish question. There was a wonderful Tory MP who said, wouldn't it be wonderful if the Irish would just agree to live in a federation of the United Kingdom presided over by the British King? That would satisfy everybody, wouldn't it? And that English insensitivity to Irish history, it's like saying Ireland should be reincorporated into the United Kingdom. Going to Kosovo and expecting them after, remember, 1 million, most of their population had to flee for their lives because of the sheer brutality. 20,000 women raped, not a single Serb officer or soldier held accountable. I think we should draw a line under that. It would be like in 1965, you still had the Germans and the French refusing to recognise each other, demanding Alsace-Lorraine was reattached to Germany on the Sudetenland, demanding there are endless war crime trials. I mean, horrible things happen.
And there still could be indictments.
Oh, look, these war crime trials could go on for another 100 years. And until everybody dies. But actually, at some stage, I'm not saying there should be a statute of limitations for war crimes. There were horrible revenge killings, massacres. As I say, not a single Serb's been held accountable for mass rape at the time. I mean, I'm not saying they should necessarily. I would like the international community to say to Belgrade and Pristina, let's draw a line, let's move on.
Mimosa, we were talking about the EU statement on European integration, and you were talking it up and saying how great it was that Kosovo was part of that, but in effect all the commentators I've been reading have been suggesting that Kosovo's been relegated, that it really isn't something the European Union's interested in at the moment.
Well, I think that if you are referring to the strategy which was recently published, launched in the EU, I will have to say or to give few comments in regard to this. I see that the relations between Kosovo and EU has been upgraded through this strategy, because there are certain elements that prove the statehood of Kosovo toward the EU integration, generally speaking. For the first time in one document, in one EU document, we see that Kosovo has been considered and treated, or it has been referred as a country, as an independent country, the same as they address to 5 other Western Balkan countries. We've seen that there is going to be an agreement of normalization between Kosovo and Serbia. Another thing that we are very much working on to get it as soon as possible, and through this agreement of normalization, Kosovo will be, Serbia in fact will have to recognize the independence of Kosovo, which will pave the way for us toward the membership to the UN and continue our path to the EU integration. And the same way, it will pave the way for Serbia to get the EU membership.
Okay, I understand that, Mimosa. Dennis or James, please come back with anything she said. But my question would be, she's talking it up as though Serbia will eventually say it has to recognise Kosovo because it wants to get into the European Union. Another headline I read suggested that may happen within the 12 months. What's your assessment of where it is?
I don't think we're going to see this immediately. Remember, this has been a very, very bitter and hard-fought campaign, and it's one that sort of ebbed and flowed in strange ways. 5 years ago, I felt that Serbia was much closer to recognising Kosovo than it is today, and I would hope that it would go back in that direction. Look, you know, I work on secession, and I can see where the concerns lie about this, but at the same time, you know, this is an issue that needs to be sorted out. And the problem we've had time and time again is that Serbia has missed its opportunity to get the best possible deal. And every time it backs away, and then when it realises that actually what it could have got at that stage was the best thing they could have got at that stage, it's too late. The debate's moved on. And I think that this has been the real tragedy in many ways.
So where are they now, the two countries?
Well, there's a process of normalisation, which is overseen by the EU, which has produced some good headlines, but a lot of this is about implementation. It's about trying to find ways that Serbia and Kosovo can interact with each other short of full recognition. So it allows, for example, much freer trade. It allows for people to cross over the border, the boundary.
It's really difficult at the moment.
And it's also remembering that people have links on both sides. It's not just the Serbs who live in northern Kosovo who have ties with Serbia. You've got many Albanian families who have ties with parts of southern Serbia where there's still Albanian communities, and that's been hindered. We need to have a normalization, and this is what the EU is really focusing on. But I don't think anyone is under any illusion that ultimately Serbia, if it wants to join the European Union, is going to have to recognise Kosovo, because normalisation, best will in the world, it still creates a lot of problems, and you just need to have a standard, if you like, interstate relationship between the two.
Dennis, I know you know Mimosa, so if you want to ask a question of her right now and leave me out of it, she's just there.
Well, hi, Mimosa. What the polite point I would put, and to a dear friend, and you were a wonderful ambassador for Kosovo in Europe, is I think the present national leadership of Kosovo overemphasises the American connection. As we know, there's a giant statue of Bill Clinton.
Yeah, it looks rather isolated at the moment, doesn't it?
And apparently there were a lot of babies called Tony Blair at the time. I'm not Robin Cook, but I do think, I keep hearing America, 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 and the Kosovan ambassador in Washington is a genius because she managed to get in to see Donald Trump before the inauguration. I don't think a British ambassador did. She's a very, very effective woman. But all the same, I think Kosovo has to spend and invest in real energy, money, diplomatic outreach to Germany, France, talk to Madrid. There's 101 small things that need to be done. And so many of my friends in Kosovo love getting that plane to Washington, Boston, Chicago. They ought to think more about Madrid, London, and Athens.
Well, Mimosa, this is Dennis's suggestion. I saw a slight smile on your lips, if I may be so presumptuous. In your next job, which Dennis, I think, would like to see as an ambassador once again, are you going to take that advice?
Well, we are a young country, young state. As a young democracy, we're trying to get the best practices from our friends and our supporters. We want to pay a great tribute to everybody who has gave a contribution to our statehood and state building process. Of course, it's not that we appreciate highly everything that the US has done over the years, but we pay the same tribute to EU countries equally, to Germany, France, the most influential countries, UK including. We are eager to see that we are going to establish good relations also with Spain, which is seen as the country which is creating huge problems to Kosovo. But I have to admit that it was Spain in favor, or it did not block Kosovo when we signed the agreement with the EU. As EU member state, they did not oppose to such an agreement.
Mimosa, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to come back to James for sort of a final word on this. If we are to look for anything that sees Kosovo's cause advanced, indeed Serbia's cause advanced in terms of European integration, global integration, what would it be? What would be the next thing?
Well, I think, you know, we really need, everyone needs to sit down and think how we actually address the outstanding differences that exist between Kosovo and Serbia, and try and understand what Serbia
mediation?
wants to. I think some sort. I mean, this is not about challenging Kosovo's statehood. I think, you know, as was said, that ship has sailed, and I completely agree. But I think that there are still outstanding issues, and Serbia needs to understand it needs to be realistic about what it can still get. And I think that's about providing protection for the Serbian communities that remain in Kosovo, perhaps a high degree of autonomy. We're not talking another Bosnia scenario, but certainly something which gives them greater cultural autonomy, and also something to protect the religious sites. And I think, you know, just trying to get Serbia to understand that, look, you know, there needs to be some movement on this, that this needs to be resolved. It will solve a lot of problems.
Well, what kind of pressure could people put on Serbia to make this happen? Again, the threat of not being in the EU in 2025?
Well, I think we have to tread very carefully. You know, Serbian public sentiment is in a very fragile place at the moment. There's a lot of pro-Russian sentiment, and we don't want to be pushing people too far on that. So I think it's about the carrots.
If I may, James, I mean, when
you're going to have to be quick, Dennis.
I talk to Serb friends and say the average Serb voter doesn't give a toss. It knows Kosovo is gone. This is about the elite politicians who squabble with each other a bit like they do in Northern Ireland.
Twas ever thus.
A bit of us. The most important thing would be Boris Johnson's been down to the West Balkans. Hooray for Boris. Big conference here at the Foreign Office is hosting in July. More European foreign ministers, prime ministers went and said in terms in Belgrade particularly, look, we want you in, but you've got to recognise Kosovo.
Thank you all very much indeed. Mimosa, thank you. We're going to have to say goodbye. 10 years since independence, and I noticed that Kosovo's just recently got its own international dialing code. Perhaps that's progress. Perhaps that's why we were able to talk to you, Mimosa. James and Dennis, thank you very much indeed from me, David Foster and the team. Appreciate your company. Hope to have it next time. Bye-bye.